Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us for this first in our webinar series. Today is entitled An Introduction to Integration for Local Government. Important to say that this is an introductory session, so we've got different levels of technical ability on the call today. We will be running 4 more sessions that get a little bit more technical. Today's session has been run by myself and my colleague Tom Harris, but our future sessions will be in association with WSO2, who are integration partners. Encourage you to join up, spread the word, and if you're on our email list, if you've registered for this session, you'll be able to you'll receive emails and you'll be able to attend these future sessions. Give me 1 second, sorry. So today's webinar, Fergal Coleman is my name. I'm a director here at Symphony 3, and on the line I've got my colleague Tom Harris. Tom, maybe give us the quick 5-minute spiel about yourself, what you do at Symphony 3, and you're also studying up in Melbourne Uni, so tell us what you're learning up there.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Tom. I've been working with Symphony 3 for a little over a year now. I mainly work in the integration team here, but I've just started my master's in software engineering as well, so that's fills most of my time as well.
Great. So in terms of the audience, thanks Tom. We've got a wide variety of people, I think, joining us today. We've got CEOs of local governments, we've got some general managers, we've got some comms and community development people, so I'm guessing you guys aren't hugely technical, and then we have some IT managers and digital managers. So we'll try and not be too technical, but hopefully have a little bit of technical stuff in there to keep IT managers and digital managers engaged. I've got everybody on mute by default, apart from myself and Tom. So if you have any questions, there should be a chat box available to you. We're encouraging questions, so if you can't see it in your little screen down below, you can click the more button. I think there'll be a chat button there. Pop up your questions, type them into the message box, and we'll answer them as we go. We'll also record this session and we'll add it to our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to get a link of that afterwards, just let us know. We'll flick you a link. We'll also put out an email newsletter with the details for anyone who's attended the session. So what are we going to talk about? Beyond the introductions, we'll jump into just digital disruption broadly and integration, and you know, I guess the connection between both. I'm not going to harp on too much about digital disruption because we hear about it every day. We'll then spend a little bit of time asking Tom to explain some of the key words and the jargon to us that you know, I even have trouble kind of getting my head around. We'll then move into the local government context. So we'll look at digital transformation in local government, and we will, you know, why integration is so crucial to that. And then we'll finish off with a couple of simple examples just to show how this stuff works in practice. The examples we got are from, you know, some of the smaller councils actually. So I think if you're from a regional or rural council, don't think that this has just been done by some of the, you know, the big councils. This is quite affordable technology. You know, we've got councils such as Mansfield and Golden Plains who are quite small, who've been successfully using some of these integration technology now for a few years. And on the way, ask questions. We'll also leave some time at the end for questions. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. If not, let us know through the chat box, and myself and Tom will pick up the questions and any issues you've got along the way. In terms of Symphony 3, I think most of you who are here know who we are. Look, our aim is to help you as councils deliver simple, connected customer experiences to your residents and ratepayers. How we do that: we offer strategic technical consulting at the top end, but we also have a digital platform, and it's clever, but it's also integrated. What we think this offers to you guys is smart glue. And that's our job, is to put the smart glue into your buildings that lets you to connect all of your systems, connect your customers to your systems and your services, and obviously that streamlines things and makes for a much better service offering out to the community. Some of our clients, we've worked with probably 60 local governments between myself and certainly my fellow director. But the ones you see here are some of the ones we're working with at the moment, particularly those up the top of the slide, and we'll use some examples from these councils as we go forward. So, digital disruption. As I said, I won't harp on it, but I saw this quote from Satya Nadella, from the CEO of Microsoft. He's obviously done a remarkable job there turning that organization around. And he was making a comment on digital disruption. Talked about everything being digitized today. So marketing is digitized, finance is digitized. Across every industry, every function is digitized. And obviously all this is driven by information technology and integrated technology. The last sentence, he says, it's no longer discrete. So these systems no longer stand alone. And to me, the opposite to discrete is integrated. So I thought that was a good quote to get us started. If we talk more broadly about where integration fits in this, I think, for the non-technical people who are on the call, you need to start thinking of IT like Lego blocks. And they laugh at me in the office here because I carry Lego blocks around with me when I go to meetings. Lego blocks, you have your underlying platform, which is normally green, and on top of that is where you put your Lego blocks. Integration technology is similar. We'll talk about service buses. That's your green piece. And then your Lego blocks are all the software that you can add and connect and plug and play as you go. Your IT has to be like this in the future. This allows, obviously, for integrated systems, but also allows scalability. So that's why you see startups like Uber and Airbnb growing so quickly. Importantly, as I've said before, this technology is affordable. So it's not just about for the big boys anymore. It's available to smaller organizations and mid-sized organizations. It's causing massive disruption. It has caused massive disruption and whole new companies that have taken over industries. And of course, it's changed how we live, work, and play. And this is having an impact on local government. We're expected as local government, or you're expected as local governments, to be able to deliver the same type of services. So in terms of, the Lego blocks in play, I thought this is a good example of a typical new type of business that's out there, Tom. Webjet. It's a website, but really it doesn't offer anything. It really just connects things. Do you want to kind of tell us what it does, I suppose, in simple terms?
Yeah, sure. Webjet's it's a really interesting example. Definitely an example of a modern day application. So there's no Webjet airline out there. There's no planes getting flown around by Webjet. They're basically sitting on top of a whole range of different providers, different airlines, and providing that data back to the consumer in this case. So a customer will log on and we'll be able to get a summarized, centralized package of all the airline information out there for a specific set of dates or locations.
Yeah, that's right. So, they don't own any assets. In many respects, they don't even own the content on their website. They're really just using what I call APIs to connect up, to connect all these services together and present them to you. And obviously taking a clip of the ticket along the way. I guess the other thing that's important to note is this is not just happening on websites. So I think it's important to realize that integration technologies are everywhere. So if we look at cars today and the car industry, we all know, I suppose, that cars have got computers, but beyond that, they've actually got integration technologies built into them, which allows things like, IoT sensors to send messages back to servicing departments to say your car needs a service. It also ties in with obviously mapping services, so people can locate where they're going, and added value services, as we see down on the right hand side there. So what this does, of course, is that organizations like Mercedes-Benz, they don't just want to sell you one car now. They want to build a lifetime relationship with you where they're servicing you over many, many years, and really they're just swapping out one car after 3 or 4 years with the new model, and it's obviously an ongoing relationship. Um, so everything we see has got integration technologies in it, I guess, is the lesson. Any thoughts on that, Tom?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's an important point in the car one. It's definitely how the consumer's changing. I guess we're expecting a lot more from a centralized service, and we're able to I guess as a consumer, you want a lot more out of that one centralized place. So integration is really important in that case for presenting all that in that one place.
Yeah, that's correct. I like this example from our partner WSO2. They run integration for them on their website, which is really connecting a whole load of different services via a simple interface. What gets you here is that they're processing more than 1 billion transactions a day, which shows the scalability of this. I thought that was quite a big number until I went to a seminar in Melbourne last week, and someone mentioned that Google services have 10 billion API calls per second. So the sheer scale of this and the ability to move services and connect up systems around the world is just astonishing. And obviously you can scale. So you can go from a few API calls to billions with the same technology, essentially.
Yeah, it's massive. I can't even fathom 10 billion, especially per second. So,
yeah, I was still trying to get my head around it, I think.
Yeah.
So we've talked about, I guess, the technologies. We've talked about APIs. What we'll do is maybe spend 10 minutes getting a little bit technical, Tom. We'll see if you're learning anything up in the university there. So tell us, what are APIs?
So APIs are basically a software layer that's built on top of applications that exposes different processes within that application. So it describes how external or third-party services or applications can interact with the internals of that service. So it will dictate how you create a message, what format that's in, and how you structure that communication.
So someone gets onto a website, as an example, they might interact with a form. There's that form needs to speak to an internal system. The API goes off and speaks to that system and comes back with the required information. Would that be correct?
Yes. Yeah. So the API will it'll require some specific format that you need to be talking to it in that way, and that's how companies will publish their APIs so that you know how to do that, and you can build software that can interact with those systems.
Yeah, so the analogy that's often used is the restaurant analogy with a waiter. The customer is the customer. Reads a menu, knows what it wants to order from the organization or from the system, but somebody has to take that message back into the kitchen and get the food cooked up, etc., and obviously bring it back out. In that case, it's the waiter. Is that an apt analogy, that the API is your waiter?
Yeah, the waiter example is a really good analogy. And the idea that the menu is that published API that you're reading off, and you think about the message you want to give to the waiter that then is transferred to the kitchen where your service takes place. In this case, it is food preparation.
Yeah, and of course the customer here can be an internal customer, it can be another system, it can be third-party providers, and I guess it can be Webjet, if it would be a customer in this case as well, consuming APIs.
Yes, yeah. I think it's important to mention here as well that API design and how critical that is in terms of ensuring that an application is easy to use. So you can imagine, I guess, going back to the analogy, that if you've got a menu that's well designed, or an easy to use system to interact with the kitchen. It would be a lot easier to order food and interact with that restaurant.
Yes, yeah. Okay, that's one of the better explanations I've heard. We'll give you an A plus on that one, Tom. If we delve down a little bit further, so SOAP versus REST, two terms that you hear bandied around a bit. Tell us what they are and I guess what the differences are.
Yeah, they're definitely buzzwords in the tech scene, that's for sure. But they're basically two separate approaches for designing an API. So SOAP's the older of the two. It stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. So it's basically a set of rules that you adhere to when you're designing communication between two systems. So it has a few built-in features that make it a bit more fancy, but it's basically a set of communication rules that you need to follow to get two things to talk.
And it's heavier in terms of its usage than REST, but and older. But I guess it's still in use based on your slides here that you've got. So a lot of the big organisations are still using this as their communication of choice or the protocol of choice.
Yeah, I guess that's part of being around for so long is that a lot of organisations still use it. Well, I've got here PayPal, Amazon still maintain SOAP APIs and can still interact in that way. So yeah, they're definitely still prevalent in the tech scene.
So why REST? Why has REST taken over?
So REST came along a bit later. It's a bit different. It's a bit looser and a bit more flexible. So it allows for different types of messaging formats, which isn't part of the SOAP system. So it's a bit more lightweight, which means you can communicate a bit faster, and it's just a bit more flexible in terms of design. So a common analogy that's used is describing SOAP as an envelope and REST as a postcard. So you can imagine you can communicate a lot quicker. You can write down a message on a postcard and post it off straight away without any overhead of like having to put it in the envelope and put the right address. And so I think that's a good analogy for describing the overhead between the difference between the two.
So the vendors themselves decide whether they'll expose their APIs as SOAP versus REST. Is that correct?
Yeah, it'll come back to the developers that create the API and whatever they choose to do to expose their processes is up to them. And
we obviously work with both, and internal IT departments would have to kind of maybe not work in them, but certainly understand the difference, I guess, between both.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just part of there being many approaches to designing an API is you kind of have to understand that not all communication is going to look the same, and you need to be aware of that.
Okay, SOAP UI very quickly is a user interface, free to download, I believe, and for any aspiring integration people in tech departments, worth downloading and playing with. Would that be correct?
Yeah, it's a tool we use a lot here. It's basically just a good way to test out the availability and functionality of different APIs.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's a really useful open source tool.
Great. Microservices, this is another buzzword that's talked about a lot. Give us a very quick explanation of what it is and why people should at least know what they are.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely becoming a lot more commonly talked about. It's basically an extension on the SOA architecture, which is the idea that if you break down the service you're trying to provide into smaller single function services, so that sort of are well defined in terms of what they're trying to achieve and have simple goals rather than a big, I guess, the term that's often used is monolithic to describe like a large service that provides a whole range of services in a bigger package, but so microservices kind of breaking it down.
You've used the example of weather app to explain it earlier or before when we spoke before.
Yeah. I think the weather app's a good idea. I mean, a good example of this. So if you think of a development team that's wants to create a weather app, they have a whole range of data that they can present back to the customer. But if you think about the application of microservices, it's kind of breaking down the different pieces of data that you could provide back. So if you imagine like temperature and humidity are two separate pieces of a forecast that you can send back to a consumer. If you break that down into different services that can provide those single pieces of information, you've got a more flexible and scalable system, and it's much easier to develop with.
Great. And finally, which is really important, a middleware, and the notion of middleware and an enterprise service bus. Give us the layman's terms and an explanation on that as a final technical slide.
Yeah, sure. So it's a good way to describe it is the plumbing for an IT infrastructure. It's basically connecting all the dots in a smart and scalable way. So middleware is basically responsible for transforming those messages between two communicating entities. So if you can imagine, a good analogy is if two people speak different languages, you need a translator in between that is changing and adapting the languages between the two.
Yeah.
So the ESB is an architecture we use here in our integration solutions. It's basically an architecture where you put a communication bus in between all your different services. So this bus is responsible for routing those messages and for transforming and translating each of those messages so that they're useful for each of the services that are connected to the infrastructure.
Yeah. So if something comes in from the analogy earlier on, we talk about forms because they're easy to understand, I suppose. With a document, somebody fills out a form and a document on it or an address, that could come into the ESB. The ESB could say that's a document, send it to the trim software for document management. That's a location, send it to the GIS system. Those rules are written within the service bus. Yeah.
So there's this processing power within the service bus that can adapt and route messages based off their contents, which is really powerful, I think, when you're creating a smart integration solution.
Yeah, and really, really important. We'll get to it in a few minutes and try and explain why, particularly in a local government context. So thank you, Tom. That was good. Hopefully we haven't lost too many of the non-technical people. Hopefully it's made sense. If there's any other questions around that you've got, just pop them in the chat box, and we'll come back to them later in the session. So I want to jump in and just think about the local government context and digital transformation and where integration fits. Obviously, technology on its own is not enough, so we need to go back and think about why we're doing this. We all know, anyone in local government, why, I suppose. We want to meet customers' expectations. So Tom, you're probably 20 years younger than me, at least. You just expect to be able to do things on a mobile channel now.
Yeah, it definitely reflects my generation, I think. But we expect that businesses have an online entry point. We expect that we can do stuff at home on our laptops, our smartphones. I think the idea of actually having to go into a place is quite
foreign.
Foreign. I think it's not. We expect more now, I think, as a consumer, and definitely as a young consumer.
I think that's right, yeah. And I think we have to be thinking about your generation that are coming through, and obviously people coming into the workforce as well are of your generation. Other reasons to do this is obviously to drive efficiency. So there are massive savings to be had, even in the smallest councils, which we've observed. Obviously, it meets customer expectations, and as part of that, it improves customer service and service delivery. And I think integration allows us to find new and better ways of doing things. I know we've got some IT managers on the line who've done a lot of work around smart city technologies. They've got obviously use APIs to send data back and forth, and it allows us to deliver and improve on the service. If we figure out where best to use these technologies, we can actually apply them to our process and say, right, well, here's a cumbersome process. How can we make it more, how can we use these technologies to make it better? Obviously, bins being an example that's often bandied around where, maybe we have a sensor on a bin which tells us when it needs to be picked up. So we can actually save time picking up bins that don't need to be cleaned out, as an example. Good quote from a recent report by Adobe and Deloitte. I think another reason why we should do this at the very highest level, it's about making things easier for the likes of you, Tom. We don't have to go, if we get this stuff right, we don't have to go into offices. And Deloitte's estimate that effective transactions could give 1 day back to every adult every year, which would make people a lot more satisfied with government services, I think. Another recent report, just to look at very quickly, was from the research firm IDC, and they look at digital maturity across a whole range of industries in Australia and New Zealand. They found 5 types. You got the digital resistor, people who don't want to do anything. You've got the digital explorer, people who are trying things on an opportunistic basis. You then got digital players who are building some repeatable processes using digital technologies. You've then got digital transformers, who are starting to provide world-class services. And finally, we've got the digital disruptors who are remaking whole markets and killing industries in some respects, and starting new industries at the same time. In our view, and most of the councils we see are probably in the digital explorer and the digital player fields, and that's similar to what this report finds across other industries. A quote from the report says that the reality is that 64% of ANZ enterprises are digitally stuck. So they might be doing some stuff digitally, but they're siloed digital projects, and they can't extend them beyond their little silos or the department to really start driving results. And we observe the same in local governments. So I guess the question is, what do we do about it? Today we've got a technology lens on, but really what we must acknowledge that digital transformation obviously changed management, changing culture, and acquiring new skills is really important. However, you can't get rid of the technology as well, and we know that a major roadblock for councils is the fact that their systems don't or can't communicate. So integration of systems is the way, and one of the key ways of being able to break this deadlock. This is a high-level digital roadmap that I've pulled from one of our engagements. Just without harping on it too much, I think at the front end, we want to deliver a seamless experience, so we help people to develop better websites and digital front ends. But the second part is connected systems, so glue. As is the fourth part there. And these are working streams that we would work with councils. So you've got to learn to connect your information systems together. And then you've systematically got to start connecting all your services over time to deliver this coordinated and coherent experience. So I guess the point of this slide is just to say that this stuff's not really possible without the right integration strategy and the right integration technology. We released a simple infographic a couple of years ago that kind of tried to explain some of, I guess, the change that's happening in local government. And I know you like this, Tom, but the traditional IT and council, I think council's IT departments for many years was to make sure that the building was secure, make sure the core apps worked effectively, and that was good. So, at that stage, the customer, who's highlighted in green here, probably was used to coming into council to deal with customer service. They might have had a website that was a basic brochure website, and in the last 10 years, I guess people could post something on Facebook that would go through the customer service. And you had field staff who were often desk bound and having to go out in trucks and things to, review assets and stuff like that. People wanted to work outside the office. They probably had a cumbersome Citrix tag that they had to use. They had that code that they had to get in on a certain laptop, which was slow. I guess it worked for its time. If we take today's council, the whole world has changed. Customers want to be able to get on the website, but they want the website to go through to council. They want to be able to transact via the website. Social media has become far more prevalent. The core applications that council IT people are trying to manage are moving out to the cloud. So you've seen some applications in-house, some out in the cloud. You've got state and federal APIs that are becoming available as well, so systems need to connect with those. You've got staff in blue there who don't want to be desk bound. They want to be on tablets and smartphones out in the field talking to customers. And then finally, you've actually got the trees and the bins that are starting to be connected up as well. What this is great in many respects. It creates change, but it's this is your spaghetti, Tom, that you talked about earlier. All these red lines have to be controlled and managed, and there's no fault tolerance certainly in this diagram.
No, yeah, when you've got something designed like this, like you can just see how many lines in this infographic. It's overwhelming. The points of connection between internal council staff and systems and employees and exterior things. There's a lot going on. You need a smart design.
Yes, correct. Which is our smart design is our third diagram, and really what we talk about having is integration web services or integration technologies, which we call the glue, and that really allows you to put some order, some security, fault tolerance, and scalability around what you do. Use of these cloud-based solutions and APIs. Now, if I spin it around and we look at it in terms of systems themselves, here's a typical, collection of council systems. The light blue ones are probably internal systems, and then the ones in the beige there are often online systems or cloud-based systems that will be out there. These systems need to be connected. You'll have some vendors out there, such as some of the big ERP vendors, Tech1, Infor, Civica, which will do maybe 4 or 5 of these, and they may connect them, those 4 or 5 things, but they don't connect all of them. So we do need to try and connect them to deliver this seamless experience. If we take the spaghetti route, what we do is we have all these one-to-one connections and APIs between multiple systems, and very, very quickly it becomes unwieldy. So if we take an example of CRM complaints, let's say we had our CRM connected up with 5 or 6 different systems. If the CRM system goes down, that could effectively knock out 5 or 6 other systems. Would that be correct, Tom?
Yeah, well, it's fault isolation essentially. Like, part of software development is things do fail, and you get inconsistent data at specific parts. But if you've got a design like this, you're asking for trouble in terms of if certain parts rely on specific features operating as designed, you're going to run into issues.
Yeah, and I think, look, this can work if you've got 1 or 2 systems. You can have that point-to-point integration, but not in a council context where you might have up to 40 systems. It's just unwieldy. So what we need to do is obviously put in place what we call an integration platform. This is your middleware. And to go back to that example, if we have a CRM complaint system, Tom, we can still connect it up with 4 or 5 other systems via the integration platform. But if the CRM goes down, that won't affect any of the other systems. Would that be correct to say?
Yeah. The integration platform's quite powerful in that sense, and it can monitor the availability of each of the systems as well, which it can be really good for recovery in terms of if we as developers get notified when something goes down because of the platform monitoring it, it means we can bring it back online and fix it a lot quicker.
So we can put these rules and we can write these rules into the integration platform. Is that correct?
Yeah. The platform itself can have a lot of that logic inside and monitor all that. I think it's also important to mention scalability here as well. Like, if you've got a new system coming in, like I can already see Twitter and Facebook down the bottom there. If you've got a new social media platform that enters the game and you want to bring that in, and if you've got your spaghetti architecture, like from the previous slide, you have to think about all the bits that have to connect to this new thing that you're adding in, and you want it to connect and how it's going to fit in. But I guess if you've got an integrated design like you've got pictured here. It just means you need to connect it up to the integration platform and you're good to go, and you just need to figure out the logic inside there.
I think as well, it makes it easier to replace systems over time. I think that's an important consideration for councils, you know. So if you do want to replace your CRM system, the fact that you've integrated with other systems using an integration platform means it's not going to be really difficult to disentangle your CRM. Essentially, we get back to the Lego analogy. You can plug out your old CRM and plug in a new one.
Yeah, it's very flexible in that sense.
Yeah. Now, if we go back to some of your lessons earlier on about REST and SOAP, I guess those arrows would be written with either REST or SOAP. One of the questions that pops up very often is, we've got an old clunky old system, an integration platform, and we certainly do it ourselves. We can handle things like batch uploads as well, can't we?
Yeah. The integration platform's pretty powerful in that sense that you can handle a whole range of different systems that can be quite old, use older messaging formats, or use CSVs or anything that that can be handled in there. It's quite powerful in that sense and adaptable.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we observe as well with our customers is sometimes they think, well, I've got these old systems, we can't do integration yet. The reality is that you probably have 40 odd systems, so you're going to take you a few years to round all of these up anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in a lot of councils for sure.
And I think this, without getting into the detail of this slide, people might go, "Oh, yeah, that's fine," but we can do the spaghetti junction. But this is an actual diagram from a council where we tried to look at all their systems. One of the things we wanted to connect was name and addresses, which are highlighted here with the N. And you can see that names and addresses are in probably 40 odd systems in a typical council. Down the bottom, we've got what we call a single customer view where we connect them up. But without the glue, we actually have no way of moving data around between these systems. It's trying to do that in a point-to-point environment would be next to impossible.
Yeah, it also means you've just got consistent data throughout. If you've got an integrated solution where everything's connected up, it means that you don't have one piece of information somewhere that contradicts another, and it just means that you've got a more cohesive system.
Yeah, and the example we use, if someone wants to get on the website to update their details, and they might be their phone number or their email address, they can put it on the website. It can go into the glue. The glue can say, right, go and find every system where this person's details are in, and based on the rules, update it automatically. Or, if it's something like the name and address register, send an email to somebody to tell them that this person's changed their address. So the rules, while the glue is important, the rules within the glue also become reasonably important in that particular context. So that's, I guess, a quick overview of enterprise integration and council. The three key things, I guess, to take away is that, if we can do this correctly, we can start providing customers with a seamless experience across all our applications. We can eliminate manual processes to a huge degree, and we can connect all systems. So obviously, IT managers want to connect the core applications, but we've also got cloud systems, and importantly here, I think shadow IT. So shadow IT is the systems that you guys who aren't in IT, you get frustrated because IT won't let you have a system, so you go off and buy something. Happens in every single building. So long as you're going and buying these systems and they've got a modern API, IT can eventually pull them back into your, hopefully bring them back into the overall ecosystem. So my advice to every council is to two things when they're buying new systems. Number one, make sure it's got a modern API. And then I guess find out what the cost of using that API is. That's really important. Most modern, or a lot of modern cloud-based systems will offer their API for free because they understand the value of an ecosystem. Some of the incumbents will try and charge money for it. And, it's important to understand what the dynamics around that. So let's jump in for the last kind of 10 minutes and talk about some simple examples. And I'm not going to delve into too much detail. But I guess what we're observing, even last year working with our councils, we probably integrated 20 odd systems. In this case, these are some of the systems we've integrated with. Often what we'll see is we'll want to do something customer facing via a website or an app, via online forms or a payment or of some sort. And we'll want to send that, into the smart glue and then make sure it gets sent out to Microsoft Dynamics or Open Office. If it's a document, it gets sent to Trim. If there's the GIS information, it gets sent into the GIS, etc., etc. So a couple of examples. Here's what looks like a very simple form that we have at Mansfield Shire. People can submit a request. They can put in a category. They can put in their name. They can pull out they can put in their address. They can make add attachments. Now, with a simple online form, that would go as an email to someone, and they'd still have to do an awful lot of manual processing. But if we get it right, and this is a similar request, but it's a road issue request via a similar form, we can actually use the APIs and the middleware to actually reduce all this manual input. So this is an actual documentation that we put together for this client. Down the green boxes, down the right-hand side, for want of a better word, are kind of API calls. So you can see that we're able to use the middleware to go in and see if a form. So it might be a road request that's pointing out a pothole. We can actually go in and see whether someone's pointed out that pothole before. If so, we don't take the request. We don't need to take the request. If someone puts in a location, we can go into the GIS and retrieve the location. In this case, what we were able to do is say, right, this is a road request based on these coordinates. What we'll do is we'll go in and see who maintains this road. If it's maintained by the council, put it into the council CRM to be worked on. If it's maintained by a third party, then send it off to the system of the maintainer. So council doesn't even need to necessarily see it or have to action it. And other things, it can go into the CRM and see if that person exists as a contact. If not, it can create the contact. So that's a good example of 7 or 8 different API calls, I guess, Tom, that are used for one of our more simple looking forms. Under the covers, it's not quite so simple.
Yeah, it's a great example, just because there's a lot of different data getting thrown around here, and you can imagine the ESB, the processing power of that in itself to understand what one message means in terms of what a certain piece of data needs to be, what needs to be done with that, where it needs to be routed to. It's quite powerful in getting an integrated system.
Yeah. Same with things like waste forms. Again, simple waste form. And again, going into different systems, seeing if the person exists. In this particular case, there was 17 different possible combinations for this particular form that we put together. We were able to write these rules in the middleware and then make sure that request landed in the right place within the building. So, a fair degree of smarts in there that we can build in to again, reduce the manual processing and make sure that things get landed in the right workflows.
Yeah, and the good thing about this logic as well is a lot of it's reusable in terms of we can build components that can handle specific types of council functions, and then these parts can then be deployed for different clients and different usages later on.
I think that's a really good point, Tom. So, obviously we're using a lot of open source components. We also take an open source philosophy, I guess. So if we've used a piece of developed a process or an API, using an API in a particular way for a client, all our other council clients can avail of that and build on top of that at a fraction of the cost, I guess, which is the shared environment that we can build with this type of software. I guess the final one is animal registration. What I wanted to demonstrate here is that we can take payments, obviously. We use a system called Stripe. But the other thing is that this was using, I think we were trying to get into Tech 1 at the time, and we didn't have access to the APIs, but we were able to use the DSS to create batch uploads. And you'll see the use of CSV files here. And I think once a night we were able to take those payments and send them through and get them updated into the system. So as I said, while it's much better if we have modern APIs, it's not always necessary. We can work some magic with these tools as well to connect some of the older systems. So there are kind of three basic examples. If we look at it from, I guess, back at a high level, what we're trying to go is from the now up the top for many councils to the where. So if we look at the red man, that's your customer. They're having to often download things off a website. They're having to print things off. They're having to drive to council and queue. They might have to go and get money on the way. They then have to stand in queue, hand over the money to somebody on the other side in green, which is your staff. And that person might have to re-enter that information multiple times into a system. It might be 2 or 3 people that do that. And then somebody has to, lodge the check and go back to the bank. So what we're trying to achieve is simply, and you talked about it earlier on, the expectation of your generation, Tom, where you're having it, you've had a rough day, you sit down on the couch, you want to have a beer and you realize you need to make a payment. You can pull out your smartphone and your credit card, log on and get it done very, very quickly. And nobody in council often necessarily needs to see what you're doing. It just goes directly into the systems.
Yeah, I've definitely painted myself as a bit of a spoiled Gen Y, but I think this diagram is really good for showing the growing expectation from a customer, but then also the lack of the green man, I guess, in the bottom part, in minimizing need for council employees to do a lot of manual tasks.
Yeah, that's right. So really what we're getting is better service for delivery, reduced costs, and we're getting happier customers, and I would argue happier staff as well, because they've been freed up from doing the manual data entry to focus on value-added services. Another way of depicting that is an actual process we did a few years ago, and we drew up this diagram. So down the left-hand side, you've got the applicant, customer services, the civil designer, records, and rates and payments. So all these entities or people had to get involved in this particular process. By introducing automation and integration, what we're able to do is automate a lot of the sub-processes and then remove some of them as well. So look, in this particular case, the applicant, his job wasn't made an awful lot better, but certainly customer services, we can see we've removed a lot of what they do, and then we've automated the rest. The customer services, or person in customer services, doesn't actually have to get involved in this process, which is immediate cost saving. Still need our civil designer, we need their brains and their brain power to handle this particular process. But again, records, we've automated the records going into trim, into document management, so there's no need for them to be involved. And similarly with rates and payments, bar the bank reconciliation, we've been able to remove, we're able to do online payments and remove the need for them to get involved in things. So again, a real really shows how much efficiency we can get and how much cost savings we can get across the council. So I think those few examples are probably enough. We're just coming up to 50 minutes and I want to keep us on time. So just in conclusion, very quickly, integration technologies are everywhere, and they're becoming more and more ubiquitous. You don't even know they're on the websites that you're interacting with. We would argue that digital transformation, or true digital transformation, can't happen without them. Important to these technologies, they're affordable. So you'll hear from our colleagues at WSO2, the software is free to download and use. I wouldn't say it's free because someone has to support it, but certainly the cost is tumbled. So you shouldn't be precluded from looking at these technologies because you think you're too small or you can't afford it. And then, look, I guess what we'll get to in future webinars, obviously you need to have a solid integration strategy and you need to plan out what you're going to do and how your information management is going to work. But yeah, we'll get to that and we'll discuss that when we get into more detail in future webinars. So with that, look, I'd like to say thanks very much to everybody for attending. We've got to exactly 50 minutes. Good work, Tom. Today was the first webinar that I guess Tom and I have done. I've done a few, but it's been a while. We'll be doing a lot more of them. So hopefully you got value out of it. We'd like to hear any feedback you've got. And look, we've got 10 minutes to take some questions from you guys who are in. So look, if you've got any questions, please pop them into the chat box, and we will try and answer them for you. Any other thoughts, Tom, while we're waiting for see if any questions come through? Or your any parting points?
No, nothing in particular. Maybe that I don't eat avocado and toast for every meal of the day.
Yeah, you have enough coffee, I'm sure.
Yeah, barista made coffee there all the time.
So we're not seeing any questions come through, but potentially we could get some comments. Any comments from any of the IT people around APIs and how they're being used that we can share with the other participants. Don't be shy, please. Okay, I don't think we're going to get any questions. That's fine. We must have explained it well to all of you guys. I guess what we finish off, and I'd just like to say again, well, thank you very much for attending. If you've found the session valuable, we'd love to see you join us again for the 4 more sessions we've got coming up. This will be made available as a recording to you guys, as I mentioned. I've talked to 1 or 2 of our clients about running this session exclusively for them. So happy to do that with any of the other local governments that are on here if you want to run a session with maybe some of your non-IT people to explain the importance of this. So thank you, Jesse, for the feedback. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and yeah, thank you for joining us.